I'm Helen, 35, female. I live in a quiet, tree-lined suburb that felt like a sanctuary, sharing a home I thought was built on love and trust with my wife, Clara. By day, I'm an epidemiologist, a job that requires me to see patterns in chaos, to find the source of an outbreak by meticulously connecting the dots. It's a skill I never imagined I'd have to use in my own marriage. This is the story of how I uncovered a betrayal so deep it threatened to shatter my world, and how I took back my life, not with a whisper, but with a hurricane. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It started, as these things often do, with a small, seemingly insignificant detail. A loose thread on an expensive sweater. Clara and I had been married for 6 years, and our life on the surface was perfect. We had the beautiful house, the successful careers, the circle of friends who admired us as the power couple. She was an interior designer, a creator of beautiful spaces, and our home was her masterpiece. Every corner was a testament to her impeccable taste, a curated collection of art, bespoke furniture, and memories we had supposedly built together. Our friends saw us as a unit, a perfect blend of art and science. Clara, the vibrant, charming creative, and me, the steady, analytical scientist. It worked, or so I thought. The unraveling began on a Tuesday. I had just come home from a grueling 14-hour day at the Institute. We were tracking a new variant of a particularly nasty virus, and my brain was a buzzing hive of data points, transmission vectors, and statistical models. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, and all I wanted was to sink into the couch with Clara, maybe watch a mindless show, and forget about the microscopic monsters I fought all day. I walked in to find her getting ready to go out. She was dressed in a stunning emerald green dress that I'd never seen before, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves. She looked breathtaking, and for a moment, my exhaustion melted away, replaced by a familiar warmth. "Wow," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You look incredible. Big night." She turned, her smile a little too bright, a little too quick. "Oh, just a networking thing. A potential new client is in town, big hotel chain. David, you know, the developer I mentioned, he set it all up. It'll probably be dreadfully boring, but you know how it is." I did know. Her work often involved schmoozing with wealthy clients. David was a name I'd heard a few times over the past couple of months, a high-flying real estate developer with a portfolio of luxury properties. Clara had been working on a design proposal for one of his new boutique hotels. It was a huge opportunity for her. Well, knock 'em dead. I said, walking over to give her a kiss. Her cheek was cool against my lips, and she pulled away a fraction of a second too soon. I noticed her perfume. It was a rich, musky scent, heavier than the light, floral ones she usually wore. It was beautiful, but it wasn't her. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing a small, glittering clutch from the console table. "I'll probably be late." And she was gone. I stood there for a moment in the sudden silence of our perfect home. The scent of her new perfume lingered in the air. I shook my head, chiding myself for being overly analytical. It was just a dinner, a new dress, new perfume. She was trying to make a good impression. It was logical. My brain, trained to find anomalies, needed to switch off. Later that night, as I was tidying up the living room, I saw her everyday work tote on the armchair where she'd dropped it. A stray file was sticking out. Annoyed that she'd left a mess, I went to put it back in her bag. That's when I saw it. Tucked into a side pocket was a small, exquisitely wrapped gift box from a high-end jeweler, one we both knew was ridiculously expensive. My heart gave a strange little lurch. My birthday was 2 months away, our anniversary not for another 4. Curiosity got the better of me. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a delicate gold bracelet, intricately designed with tiny, interlocking rings. It was beautiful. It was also something I would never wear. My style was simple, practical. I rarely wore jewelry beyond my wedding band and a watch. This was ornate, flashy. It was for someone else. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I carefully put the box back in her bag, my mind racing. Who was the bracelet for? If it was for a client, why hide it? If it was a gift for me, why was it so? Wrong. It felt like a piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. The new dress, the perfume, the way she'd pulled away, the hidden gift. They were just data points, isolated incidents, but my professional instincts were screaming that isolated incidents were often the first signs of an outbreak. The following weeks were a masterclass in self-deception. I tried to bury the memory of the bracelet, telling myself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. I was busy, consumed by my work, and I let the rhythm of our life lull me back into a sense of normalcy. Clara was her usual self, charming, busy, a whirlwind of activity. She'd come home late, smelling of that new perfume, and talk animatedly about fabric swatches and lighting fixtures for the hotel project. She seemed happy, energized. I told myself I was happy for her, but the doubt was a low-grade fever, a constant, humming unease in the back of my mind. I started noticing things I'd previously ignored. The way she guarded her phone, angling it away from me whenever a notification popped up, the vague answers about her evenings out, just drinks with the team, she'd say, or another late one with David, we're trying to finalize the mock-ups. The name David was a constant refrain. David thought this, David suggested that. He was no longer just a client. He was a recurring character in the story of her life, a story from which I felt increasingly excluded. The glimmer of truth, the one that shattered my carefully constructed denial, came on a Saturday afternoon about a month after I found the bracelet. Clara was out, having told me she was meeting a supplier at a showroom across town. I was doing some work from home, surrounded by charts and research papers, when an email notification popped up on our shared tablet. It was from our credit card company, a routine transaction alert. We had a joint account for household expenses, and I usually ignored these emails, but this time, the subject line caught my eye, "Your statement is ready." On a whim, I opened it. I scrolled through the list of charges, groceries, gas, the usual things. And then I saw it, a charge from 2 days prior. Le Beau Rivet $482.50. Le Beau Rivet, the beautiful dream. It wasn't a furniture store or a design supplier. It was a notoriously expensive, famously romantic restaurant, the kind of place you go for anniversaries and grand gestures. It was nestled in a secluded spot an hour out of the city, known for its private booths and breathtaking views. We'd talked about going there once, for our 5th anniversary, but Clara had said it was too cliché. $482.50. That wasn't a business dinner, that was a dinner for two with expensive wine. My blood ran cold. She had told me she was working late at the office that night, eating a sad desk salad. I checked my calendar. 2 nights ago was Thursday. She had sent me a text around 9 p.m. saying she was drowning in blueprints. My epidemiologist brain took over, cold and methodical. I needed more data. I remembered her mentioning a new app she was using to track her design projects, something to keep her inspiration boards organized. I picked up her laptop from her desk. It was password, protected, of course. But we had been together for 6 years. I knew her patterns. I tried her mother's birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried the name of her childhood dog, a golden retriever she'd adored. Bingo. I felt a pang of guilt, a sense of violating her privacy, but it was drowned out by a roaring wave of suspicion. I found the app. It was filled with beautiful images, mood boards for the hotel project, color palettes, furniture ideas. It all looked perfectly professional, but then I noticed a folder tucked away at the bottom of the list, a folder titled Personal. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I clicked on it. It wasn't password, protected. She'd gotten careless. The folder contained only a handful of photos. They weren't design inspirations. They were selfies, Clara and David, the real estate developer. In the first photo, they were laughing, heads close together, a bottle of wine on the table between them. The restaurant was unmistakable. It was Le Beau Rivet. In the next photo, his arm was around her, and she was looking up at him with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in years. An unguarded, radiant adoration that used to be reserved for me. The final photo was the one that broke me. It was a picture of a woman's wrist, adorned with a delicate gold bracelet with tiny, interlocking rings. The same bracelet from the box in her tote bag. The caption below it was a single word, mine. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. The beautiful dream wasn't the restaurant. It was the life I thought I had. The perfect facade of our home, of our marriage, crumbled around me, revealing an ugly, rotten core. The outbreak was no longer a suspicion. It was a full-blown epidemic, and I was standing at ground zero. For 2 days, I was a ghost in my own home. I moved through the rooms, performed the routine tasks of living, but I was hollowed out, consumed by the toxic knowledge of Clara's betrayal. The images from her laptop were seared onto the inside of my eyelids. Every time she spoke to me, her voice was a discordant note in the symphony of lies she had composed. Every touch felt like a violation. I was drowning in the silence, in the space between what was real and what I had believed to be real. I knew I couldn't confront her, not yet. A direct confrontation would lead to a storm of denials, gaslighting, and crocodile tears. She would twist the narrative, paint me as the snooping, paranoid wife. I'd seen her do it with others, a subtle manipulation of facts until the other person was left questioning their own sanity. I was a scientist. I needed irrefutable proof, a complete data set. What I had was damning, but it was circumstantial. I needed something more. I needed to understand the scale of the deception. The answer, I knew, was in her phone. It was the epicenter of her secret life, a digital Pandora's box, but it was always with her, locked and protected. Getting access seemed impossible. I spent the next few days observing her, my mind in analytical mode. I noted her habits, her routines. She charged her phone on her nightstand, and while she slept, she took it into the bathroom when she showered. She never let it out of her sight. My chance came on a Wednesday evening. Clara had a headache and decided to take a bath. She lit some candles, put on some soft music, and disappeared into the master bathroom, leaving her phone on the dresser in our bedroom. This was it. I knew I wouldn't have long. My friend and colleague, Mike, a data scientist at the Institute, was a genius with this sort of thing. I had called him earlier that day under the guise of asking for help with a personal data recovery project. I'd been vague, but he was sharp. He understood my need for discretion and had walked me through the process of installing a piece of spyware, a ghost app that would clone her phone's data to a secure cloud server that only I could access. It was ethically dubious, a line I never thought I'd cross, but I was far beyond the point of playing fair. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my own phone. I needed to get the app onto hers. The process required a physical connection just for a moment. I crept into the bedroom. The sound of running water from the bathroom was a steady hum. Her phone was on the dresser, screen dark. I picked it up. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. It was locked with a passcode. 6 digits. I stood there, frozen. This was the one piece of information I didn't have. I took a deep breath, trying to think logically. What would she use? Not our anniversary. That would be too obvious. Not her birthday. I thought back to the laptop password. The name of her childhood dog. It was about sentiment, but a secret sentiment. What was important to her and David? I thought of the restaurant, Le Beau Rêve. Too long. Then my mind flashed to the hotel project, the one that had been the official cover for their affair. The project had a name, a chic, trendy name she had been so proud of. The aura, it was 4 letters, too short. What about the address, 1124 Preston Street? I typed it in, 1-1-2-4. P.S. No, that wasn't right. 6 digits, 1-1-2-4-7-7. No, my mind was racing. Then I remembered a conversation from weeks ago. She was on the phone with him, smiling as she talked. It's our date. She'd said, November 24th, the day it all started. I'd assumed she was talking about the project's start date. Now, a sickening realization washed over me. November 24th, 1124. What about the year? It had to have been last year. 1-1-2-4-2-2. I typed in the numbers 1-1-2-4-2-2. Click, the phone unlocked. A wave of nausea and triumph washed over me. I felt dizzy. I quickly connected her phone to my laptop with a small cable I had ready, initiated the software transfer Mike had prepared, and held my breath. The progress bar on my laptop screen seemed to crawl. Every second felt like an hour. I could hear the water in the bathroom shut off. My time was up. I frantically disconnected the cable, closed the laptop, and placed her phone back on the dresser, exactly where I had found it. Not a second later, the bathroom door opened. Clara emerged, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, her face flushed from the heat. Everything okay? She asked, looking at me. I was standing stiffly in the middle of the room. Yeah, fine, I managed, my voice sounding strained to my own ears, just looking for my book. She gave me a curious look, but seemed to accept it. She picked up her phone and started scrolling, completely oblivious. I slipped out of the room, my body trembling with adrenaline. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, I opened my laptop in the guest room. The data had been successfully uploaded. I had everything. Text messages, call logs, photos, location history. It was all there, a meticulously documented timeline of her affair. I started with the texts between her and David. The sheer volume was staggering. Hundreds of messages a day. They weren't just about logistics and secret meetings. They were declarations of love, promises of a future together. They mocked me, referring to me as the scientist, or doctor, drone. They laughed about my long hours, my dedication to my boring work that gave them so much time to be together. She's at that conference in Chicago all weekend. One of her texts read, "The house is ours. Can't wait to have you all to myself," he replied, tired of sharing. They had taken trips together, disguised as work commitments for Clara. A weekend in a vineyard, a few days in a boutique hotel in another city. One of David's own properties, I noted with a bitter irony. There were photos, too. Intimate photos of them in hotel beds, at romantic dinners, on a private beach. They looked happy, carefree, building a life on the ashes of the one I thought I was living. The worst part was discovering their plan. They weren't just having a fling. They were planning to leave their respective partners and start a new life together. David was in the middle of a messy divorce, but it was clear he was dragging it out. His wife, a woman named Sarah, was apparently being difficult. They were waiting for the right moment for David to secure a favorable settlement. And my wife, my Clara, was going to leave me, taking half of everything I had worked my entire life for. Our home, my savings, my future. It was all just collateral damage in their great love story. The secret in the screen was more than just proof of infidelity. It was a roadmap of my own destruction. As I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the tears on my face, something inside me shifted. The grief, the shock, the heartbreak. It all began to harden, to crystallize into something cold, sharp, and resolute. They had made a critical error. They had underestimated me. They saw a quiet, unassuming scientist. They were about to meet the epidemiologist. I knew how to trace an outbreak to its source, and I knew how to eradicate it. For the next week, I lived a double life. To Clara, I was the same devoted, slightly oblivious wife. I listened to her fabricated stories about work, nodded with feigned interest, and went through the motions of our shared existence. But internally, I was a different person. I was a researcher, and my project was the complete and utter dismantling of Clara and David's secret world. I spent every spare moment sifting through the mountain of data from Clara's phone. I created a timeline, cross-referencing text messages with credit card statements and location data. I built a detailed profile of their affair, noting every secret meeting place, every lie, every stolen weekend. I also started digging into David. His online presence was that of a successful, self-made real estate mogul. But the texts hinted at something darker: financial pressures, shady deals, and a contentious divorce. The key, I realized, was his wife, Sarah. According to Clara and David's texts, she was the primary obstacle to their happily ever after. They painted her as a bitter, greedy woman who was trying to take him for everything he had. But I knew better than to trust their narrative. If they could lie to me so easily, they could lie about her. Sarah wasn't an obstacle. She was a potential ally. She was the other victim in this equation, another person whose life was being systematically destroyed. I needed to find her. Finding her was surprisingly easy. She was a high school English teacher at a local public school. She had a modest social media presence, mostly pictures of books, her students' work, and her dog. There were no pictures of her and David together. Her profile painted a picture of a quiet, intellectual woman, the complete opposite of the vindictive harpy Clara's texts described. Reaching out to her was the most difficult step. What do you say to a stranger? Hello, our spouses are having an affair and planning to ruin our lives. Care to join forces? I drafted and deleted a dozen emails and messages. They all sounded insane. Finally, I settled on a simple, direct approach. I found her work email address on the school's website. The subject line was simple: a private matter concerning our husbands. In the body of the email, I wrote, "My name is Helen. I am Clara's wife. I have reason to believe she is having an affair with your husband, David. I have proof. If you are willing to talk, please let me know. I believe we may have a shared interest in the truth." I hit send, my heart pounding. For 24 hours, there was nothing. I started to think she had deleted it, dismissed it as spam or a cruel prank. And then, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was simply S. Vance. The message was short. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m., the Daily Grind coffee shop on Elm Street. Come alone." The next day, I walked into the coffee shop, my stomach churning with anxiety. I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a cup of tea. She looked tired, her face etched with a quiet sadness, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. I introduced myself and sat down. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two strangers connected by a devastating betrayal. "So," she said, her voice low and steady, "what proof do you have?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I pulled out my tablet, the one I had loaded with the most damning evidence. I showed her the photos of Clara and David at Le Beau Rivet. I showed her the picture of Clara's wrist, adorned with the bracelet. Sarah's face remained impassive, but I saw a flicker of pain in her eyes as she looked at the bracelet. "He told me he bought that for his sister's birthday," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Then I showed her the text messages, the ones where they planned their future, the ones where they disparaged us. I watched her read the messages where David called her a roadblock and complained about her unreasonable financial demands. Her composure finally cracked. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away. "I knew it," she said, looking up at me. "In my gut, I knew it wasn't just about the money. He's been so distant, so cruel. He told me I was imagining things, that the stress of the divorce was making me paranoid." She then told me her side of the story. David had initiated the divorce 6 months ago, claiming they had simply grown apart. He had been pressuring her to accept a lowball settlement, threatening to drag the process out for years if she didn't comply. He had hidden assets, moving money into complex offshore accounts and shell corporations, making it nearly impossible for her lawyers to get a clear picture of his net worth. "He's not as successful as he looks," Sarah explained, her voice hardening with anger. "He's leveraged to the hilt, the Aura Hotel project, the one your wife is so excited about. It's his last-ditch effort to stay afloat. If it fails, he's ruined." Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a story of desperation. David needed the divorce to be settled quickly and cheaply. He needed the hotel project to be a success, and Clara, with her wealthy clientele and industry connections, was his ticket. "He's using her," I said, the realization dawning on me. "He's probably promised her the world, but he's just using her to save his own skin. And she's using him to get out of your marriage with a healthy nest egg," Sarah added, her eyes flashing with a newfound fire. "They deserve each other." We sat in silence for a moment, the bitter truth hanging in the air between us. The betrayal was one thing, the cold, calculated nature of it was another. "What do you want, Helen?" Sarah finally asked, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I want justice," I said, and the word felt solid, real. "I don't want them to get away with this. I want to expose them, for everyone to see them for who they really are, but I want to do it on my own terms." A small, determined smile touched Sarah's lips for the first time. "So do I. He thinks I'm just a quiet little schoolteacher he can bully into submission. He has no idea who he's dealing with." In that small, unassuming coffee shop, an alliance was forged. We were two very different women, a scientist and a teacher, brought together by the misdeeds of our spouses. We had been cast as the victims in their sordid drama, but we were about to rewrite the script. The investigation was over. The planning was about to begin. Our plan was audacious, intricate, and deeply satisfying. It required careful timing, meticulous planning, and a shared, ice-cold resolve. Sarah and I met several more times, sometimes in quiet coffee shops, sometimes in a secluded corner of the public library. We were a formidable team. My analytical mind was perfect for strategy and data analysis, while Sarah's deep understanding of human nature and her quiet determination were invaluable. We were no longer victims. We were co-conspirators united by a common goal. The perfect stage for our final act was presenting itself to us on a silver platter, the annual gala for the City Architecture and Design Awards. It was the most prestigious event in our city's creative calendar. Clara was being honored with a Designer to Watch award, largely due to the buzz surrounding her work on David's Aura Hotel. David, naturally, would be there as her client and biggest supporter. They would be at the peak of their professional glory, surrounded by their peers, clients, and the city's elite. It was their coronation. We were going to turn it into their public execution. The plan had two main fronts, the financial and the personal. Sarah took the lead on the financial front. Armed with the information I'd gathered from Clara's phone, details about David's hidden accounts and shell corporations that he'd foolishly bragged about in text, Sarah's lawyer was able to file an emergency motion. They subpoenaed the records of the companies David thought were untraceable. The hearing was scheduled for the Monday morning after the Saturday gala. When the evidence of his financial fraud was presented, his assets would be frozen. He would walk into that gala a king and wake up on Monday a pauper. My role was to handle the personal fallout, and to do it in the most public and humiliating way possible. The centerpiece of my plan was a simple slideshow. It wouldn't contain any of the explicit photos or messages that would be too crude, too easily dismissed as a simple scorned wife revenge plot. My presentation would be more subtle, more insidious. It would be a masterclass in storytelling through data. I spent hours in my study, which Clara had so beautifully designed, creating the presentation. The first slide was a picture of me and Clara on our wedding day, smiling and happy. The title was simple, a 6-year study. The subsequent slides presented the data of their affair, stripped of emotion and presented as a scientific analysis. I used maps to show the geographic overlap of their business trips. I created charts showing the frequency of their text messages, peaking during the times I was out of town or working late. I included a timeline of their secret rendezvous, perfectly correlated with Clara's work calendar entries for client meetings. The piece de resistance was the financial analysis. I created an infographic tracing the flow of money. It showed the expensive gifts David bought for Clara, the bracelet, the designer clothes, the weekend trips, all paid for with funds he was hiding from his wife, Sarah, during their divorce proceedings. It was a cold, hard, dated, driven narrative of deceit and financial fraud. The final piece of the puzzle was Lena. I needed an accomplice, someone to help with the technical side of things at the gala. Clara and I had a mutual friend, Lena, a freelance event technician who often worked these high-profile events. I had always been good to Lena, offering her career advice and connecting her with contacts. I decided to trust her. I invited her for coffee and laid out a heavily redacted version of the story. I told her that Clara was involved with a shady client who was trying to swindle her, and that I needed to expose him at the gala to protect her. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Lena, loyal and trusting, agreed to help. She would ensure that my USB drive, containing the presentation, would be the one loaded into the main projector at the exact moment Clara was called to the stage to accept her award. In the days leading up to the gala, I had to give the performance of a lifetime. I feigned excitement for Clara's big night. I helped her pick out a dress, a stunning silver gown that made her look like a queen. I told her how proud I was, how much she deserved the award. She soaked it all in, completely oblivious, her mind no doubt filled with visions of her triumphant speech and a future with David. On the night of the gala, as I helped her clasp a diamond necklace around her neck, she looked at my reflection in the mirror. "You've been so quiet lately," she said, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Is everything okay?" I met her gaze in the mirror, my expression a carefully constructed mask of serene spousal support. "Just in awe of you," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "I'm so incredibly proud of everything you've achieved." She smiled, satisfied with my answer, and turned to admire her reflection. She looked radiant, beautiful, and utterly unaware that she was dressing for her own immolation. As we left for the gala, I slipped the small USB drive into my clutch. The storm was coming, the stage was set. The ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos. Champagne flowed, and the air buzzed with conversation and forced laughter. Clara was in her element, flitting from group to group, a dazzling smile fixed on her face. David was by her side, playing the part of the proud, supportive client. They were a picture of success, a power duo on the verge of conquering the city. They occasionally shot each other's secret, knowing glances, confident that their triumph was at hand. Sarah and I had arrived separately. We made brief eye contact across the crowded room. A silent acknowledgement, the co-conspirators ready for the final act. I found Lena by the audiovisual booth. She gave me a subtle nod. I passed her the USB drive in a discreet handshake. 10 minutes after the main course, she whispered, "When they start the awards presentation, it will be queued up and ready." I thanked her and melted back into the crowd, my heart a steady, cold drum. I endured an hour of small talk, my face aching from smiling. I watched Clara and David, observing them like a scientist observes specimens under a microscope. I saw the way his hand lingered on the small of her back a moment too long, the way she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. They were so confident, so wrapped up in their own drama, that they were blind to the world around them. Finally, the moment came. The president of the design council stepped up to the podium. "And now, for an award that recognizes a rising star in our community, the Designer to Watch award goes to Clara Thorne." The room erupted in applause. A spotlight found Clara, and she rose gracefully, beaming. She kissed David on the cheek, a bold public gesture. Before making her way to the stage, David looked out at the crowd, a smug, possessive look on his face. As Clara reached the podium, the large screen behind her, which had been displaying the awards logo, flickered. Instead of a picture of Clara or her design portfolio, the first slide of my presentation appeared, a giant photo of us on our wedding day, happy and hopeful. The title below it read, "A 6-year study." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Clara, who had her back to the screen, hadn't seen it yet. She smiled into the microphone and began her speech. "Thank you so much. I am so humbled and honored." Then the slide changed. A map of the country appeared, with red lines connecting our city to the locations of her business trips. A timeline appeared next to it, showing my work travel dates. The correlation was undeniable. Clara faltered, her voice catching in her throat. She glanced behind her, and her face went white. The blood drained from her face as she saw the screen. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure horror. In the audience, David had sprung to his feet, his face a thunderous scowl. The slides continued to change, each one a cold, hard nail in the coffin of their lies. The chart of their text messages, the side-by-side calendars, then came the financial infographic detailing the gifts, the trips, all funded by money David had hidden from his wife. I had added a final, devastating touch, a small headshot of Sarah next to the details of the hidden assets, with the caption, "Community Impact, the Cost of Deceit." The room was now utterly silent, save for the quiet click of the slides advancing. Everyone was staring, mesmerized at the screen. They were watching a marriage, a career, and a reputation being systematically dismantled in real time. Clara stood frozen at the podium, speechless, her award forgotten in her hand. Her eyes darted around the room, finally landing on me. I was standing near the back, my expression calm, impassive. I held her gaze, and in that moment she knew. She saw not her quiet, unassuming wife, but the epidemiologist who had traced the sickness back to its source. The final slide appeared. It was a single, stark sentence. Conclusion: some parasites are not microscopic. Then the screen went black. The silence was broken by David, who started shouting, lunging toward the AV booth. "Who did this? Turn it off." But it was too late. The damage was done. People were already whispering, pulling out their phones. The story was spreading through the room like a virus. I didn't stay to watch the rest. My work was done. As I turned and walked toward the exit, I passed Sarah. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It was over. The party for them was well and truly over. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of their lives behind me. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The aftermath was exactly as explosive as we had planned. The gala became the biggest scandal in the city's design and real estate communities. The story was everywhere, fueled by the hundreds of witnesses who had watched the drama unfold. Clara's award was quietly rescinded. Her clients, repulsed by the public display of deceit and the implications of financial impropriety, began to pull their contracts. Her career, which had been on a meteoric rise, was now in freefall. On the Monday morning following the gala, as planned, Sarah's lawyers presented their evidence in court. Faced with irrefutable proof of financial fraud, the judge immediately granted their motion to freeze all of David's known assets. His house of cards came tumbling down. The Aura Hotel project, already on shaky financial ground, collapsed entirely without its funding. David was ruined, both financially and professionally. He was a pariah. Clara came home that Sunday, a pale, trembling shadow of the vibrant woman she had been. She tried to yell, to cry, to deny, but there was nothing left to say. The evidence had been laid bare for the world to see. I had already packed my bags. "Why, Helen," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "why would you do this to me, to us?" I looked at her, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound and empty quiet. "You mistake the what for the why," I said, my voice as calm and clinical as if I were delivering a research finding. "This isn't a why. This is a what. This is the consequence. You were the disease, Clara. I just administered the cure." I left her standing in the middle of the beautiful home she had designed, a monument to a life that was a lie. I filed for divorce the next day. The process was swift. With the public humiliation and the clear evidence of her infidelity and her complicity in David's financial dealings, she had no leverage. She took a small settlement and disappeared from my life. I sold the house, purging myself of the last remnants of our shared life. I moved into a new apartment in the city, a clean, modern space that I could make my own. My friend Mike was a rock, helping me move, listening without judgment, and reminding me that my life was my own again. A few weeks after the gala, I met Sarah for coffee. It was the same coffee shop where we had first formed our alliance. She looked different, lighter, happier, Her divorce from David was proceeding smoothly. With his assets frozen and his reputation in tatters, he had been forced to agree to a fair settlement. "He's a ghost," she said, stirring her tea. "I heard he's trying to rebuild, but no one will touch him. As for your ex," she trailed off. "I don't know where she is, and I don't care," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. We talked for a long time about our plans for the future. She was thinking of taking a sabbatical, maybe traveling. I was pouring myself back into my work, finding comfort and purpose in the familiar world of data and disease control. We had been brought together by a shared trauma, but we were leaving as friends, two survivors who had found strength in each other. As I walked home that evening, the city lights twinkling around me, I reflected on the past few months. I had been betrayed, my world turned upside down, but in the wreckage, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I had always been the quiet one, the observer, the scientist who stayed behind the scenes, but I had learned that I was also a fighter. I had faced the outbreak in my own life, not with fear, but with strategy, intelligence, and a cold, unwavering resolve. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to chart. The research was complete, the data was conclusive, the outbreak had been contained. It was a new day, a new dawn. And I was ready for it.